This film is about you. It's about the simple ways that people might try and take your dreams, deconstruct them, and sell them back to you in hacky little plastic bags.
You have the potential to literally become whoever you want.
The fool in the tarot tradition has no legacy. Psychologist and professor Vincent Deary tells us in his new book, How We Break.
Can everybody see that okay?
The fool has no walls, no inescapable legacy of pain, fear, damage, heartbreak, terror. They just are, completely open to life. The blank figure of the fool is useful for capturing us because their life and mentality is easily transformed. They can buy a new pair of shoes and step into the image of their favourite skateboarder as they leave the shop, or take on the morning routine of some distant business coach and be instantly born again into that rich, status-dripping body.
Ain't no handouts for nobody. When they ain't have shit, they ain't offer me nothing.
Deep down, we all know that these fantasies of a blank slate are not true. But that desire to take on simple hacks and try and transform our lives in easy ways might still lead us to that self-help counter at the local bookshop, eyeing up the next panacea with our money held out in our hands.
Really close tonight, and I feel like I'm moving inside her.
Now you can say what you like about Crowded House, but the verse on Fall of Your Feet is a big one. And they weren't joking when they said that everywhere you go, you are always going to take the weather with you. The truth of the matter then is however much we want to think that standing in a field all day painting like Van Gogh is going to make our work great, or putting on a bandana and spending $2,500 on a Fender Strat is going to somehow attract people towards us like Hendrix, we do understand that the value of someone's work doesn't lie in anything that can be attained in such a simplistic way. In this video, I'm going to be trying to pull this moment in your day and hopefully reflections after it closer towards thinking about the true intimacies and complexities of your own experience. I'm going to be telling you a bit about my own specific story and also pulling in the stories of others too, to try and demonstrate something of the often complex reality of productivity and drive. A quick heads up here, I'm going to be talking about ideas of mental health and cross addiction, and also pulling in some clips from Anthony Bourdain to explore the place of productivity and certain types of psychological makeup. So if now doesn't feel like the right time to get into those aspects of his story either, then yeah, quick heads up for you.
Happiness is a fresh pack. First thing in the morning. Before I brush my teeth, I roll out of bed, light a cigarette, stumble into this room, and I start writing immediately.
Part 1. Compulsions, addictions, and the comforting noise of more.
I'm 35 now, and just over 10 years ago, I had a period in my life where I had a big drive to be alone. In my head, I was avoiding being a part of other people's lives, so I didn't have to think about their feelings or how I might be affecting them. And I just simply wanted to isolate myself with the projects that I was interested in doing. I left the country and moved to another city for 6 weeks, not to travel or meet people really, just to try and execute on a comic book idea that I'd wanted to get done. I basically did my work in the day or wandered around the city, and at night, I'd do a decent amount of drinking and then fall asleep. When I came back to the UK, I was preparing to start a year-long writing course, and despite getting other options from some of my closest friends, again I was driven to try and live on my own. Now I don't need to reflect on this experience as simply good or bad, but I do see now that my work was acting as a safe place, away from the complexities and anxieties of actually having to exist within the world.
The first season of The Bear, everybody was kind of staying in one of these semi-furnished corporate housing thing. Yeah. And I was like, I'm gonna stay in an Airbnb. And I was really miserable and so lonely.
I hope you understand that I'm not telling you this because it sounds particularly special or engaged. I'm telling you this because it's the actual truth that lay behind my productivity or creative drive at the time. My creative work was acting as a kind of overlay on top of the rest of my experience, bolstering it and giving it enough meaning and value to satiate my ongoing identity. I did get a lot better at writing in that period, so it wasn't something wholly bad. But yeah, obviously there was other stuff going on with all that cocooning. Writing, visual art, music, whatever kind of self-expression you're putting into your work can act as a kind of periscope that you can stick above the sand and use to fulfill that need you have to connect to others.
Honestly, you're so good. Thank you.
The meaning that that process and activity can give us can allow us to not see and cover over other deficiencies and problems that we might be facing.
I think it was one of the first conversations I ever had with him. I was like, hey, I know I'm just meeting you, but I don't know one heroin addict that has quit cold turkey besides you. Tell me how you did it. And he goes, you just work. When he told me that, I bought into it when I first met him. And then as I got to know him more, I realized it jumped. The addiction jumped.
Part 2. Useful frameworks.
10 years later, and one of the new ways that I've learned to understand my creative drive and also desire to be alone is through the lens of OCD. I wrote a piece about this a while ago on the newsletter, and I wanted to flesh it out here because I actually had a few people get in touch with me about it. But just before I jump in here, I do want to make it clear that I'm not trying to push these thinkings or diagnoses on anyone here. This story isn't about OCD, it's about the complexity of the human journey and how gathering more knowledge about ourselves is the real path to self-empowerment and trying to get as much fruit off the tree as possible while we're around. At the end of this video, I'm going to be coming to another quote from the Vincent Deary book. For anyone interested in kind of digging into their own thinking about this stuff, I would definitely point you towards that as a far deeper and studied exploration of these themes.
Final disclaimer. This specific section is about me, and a useful way that I understand my creative drive at the moment. It's not about you.
For me, the OCD thinking that I have in my head manifests in a number of different ways. It could be anxieties about how I affect other people around me, irrational ideas about my health, or feelings that other things that I'm responsible for are under threat in some way. But in my own journey, this understanding of the condition and the professional help that came behind it has actually been a really empowering thing. In my experience, OCD is kind of all about storytelling. It might be a story about how you've left the cooker on and need to get up from bed and go and check it again. Or that there's no real point taking the car to the shops because you might hit someone with it and not even know afterwards. These stories are pretty obviously based in irrational kinds of thinking, but that OCD part of your brain gets really good at telling you all the reasons why they might be true and convincing you that they're significant enough to act on. This is the way then that I understand my drive and interest in writing. Building arguments, trying to come up with stories about things that have happened, or pick cracks in something to make it as convincing as possible, are all skills that have been honed by this OCD kind of thinking. This is actually a super empowering way to look at this experience, and I can recognize that any of the negative kind of time that I've been spent dwelling with these things in my head is actually just the other side of the coin to all the work that I love and I'm good at and enjoy spending my time doing.
Part 3. Consider the oyster.
This is an oyster boat similar to the one on which I had my first oyster. I blame my first oyster for everything I did after. My thrill-seeking, all my hideous screw-ups in pursuit of pleasure.
Call it a character flaw, of which drugs were simply a manifestation.
Outstanding, Corporal.
People's stories and the way that they understand themselves are going to evolve from day to day, year to year, and decade to decade. And although it might be comforting or simple to understand this as a steady line of process, I think when I think about it, for me, it's more of a case of things are lost and things are gained as we move through time and along our journeys. I didn't want to go on too long in this video and just wanted to kind of hand over some thinking about the more complex truths that lay beneath my own creative drive and my own experience, so that you can take this away and maybe reflect on yourself too.
My name's Carmen. My brother's an addict. My brother was an addict. He stopped letting me into the restaurant a couple of years ago. He just cut me off cold. And I think that flipped this switch in me where I was like, okay, fuck you, watch this.
That journey of self-knowledge is going to be absolutely key for artists and creatives who want to continually develop and serve that drive that they have to make new things and engage in interesting and true products. And is necessary in terms of trying to slowly increase your understanding of how those walls around you function. To close, I thought I'd read another quote from the Deary book, as well as signpost you over to that again for a far deeper exploration of these themes and ideas. So yeah, definitely go check it out if you got the time. And with that said, let me read you out with the quote. We live in worlds of our own. Our formative encounters lay the foundation of those worlds. The origin stories that we tell about ourselves are often simple tales. The multiple mess of our becoming is reduced to the actions and intentions of a few familial variables. But of course, in the becoming of history and the origin of us, it's really not that simple.